Somewhere inside your own body, hidden in the code that built you, there are fragments left behind by people who vanished thousands of years ago. Not myths, not legends, real humans with real families who lived, loved, and disappeared. Scientists did not expect to find them. But when they looked closely enough at human DNA, they found ghosts, pieces of ancient people, still alive inside us, long after their bones turned to dust. And the deeper researchers dug, the stranger the story became, because this is not just about ancient bones in a cave. This is about lost branches of the human family tree. Branches so different from us that, at first, scientists could not explain what they had found. What you're about to hear is a true scientific mystery. It involves secret human relatives, forgotten love stories written in DNA, and a discovery that changed how we understand what it means to be human. This story matters because it is not really about the past. It is about you, every person. Alive today carries pieces of this hidden history inside their own cells. Right now, in this very moment, scientists are still uncovering new secrets. Some questions have real answers, others remain open, and researchers are honest about that. But together, this evidence tells one of the most incredible stories science has ever discovered. By the end of this video, you will understand why some scientists say modern humans are not really pure. You will learn about hidden human species that lived alongside our ancestors. And you will discover why a tiny bone found in a cold cave changed everything we thought we knew about ourselves. You will also meet a young girl who lived tens of thousands of years ago, whose bones told a story so unexpected that even seasoned scientists could barely believe what they were reading. Her existence alone proves that the walls we imagined between different ancient human groups were far thinner than anyone assumed. Let's go back to the beginning. For most of human history, people believed something simple. Humans were humans, one species, one story, one family tree, with modern people sitting neatly at the very top. For a long time, science mostly agreed. Yes, there were early ancestors, cavemen, ancients, people who looked different from us. But the assumption was clear. Those ancient people died out. Modern humans replaced them completely. Clean break, new chapter, nothing carried over. That idea felt safe. It felt tidy. It made sense of the world. But nature rarely likes tidy stories. In the early 2000s, a new kind of science began to grow. Researchers found ways to pull genetic material out of ancient bones. Real DNA, sometimes tens of thousands of years old, hiding inside fossils that had been sitting quietly in museum drawers or frozen caves. This was incredibly difficult work. Ancient DNA breaks apart. It gets damaged by time, water, and bacteria. Most samples are useless. But a small number of extremely lucky, extremely careful discoveries gave scientists something almost impossible. A direct genetic message from people who lived tens of thousands of years ago. And that message did not match the tidy story at all. The first big shock came from Neanderthals. For over a century, Neanderthals had a bad reputation. People pictured them as slow, brutish, almost animal-like. A failed branch of humanity that simply could not keep up. But when scientists finally sequenced a large portion of the Neanderthal genome, something strange appeared. Traces of Neanderthal DNA showed up inside modern humans. Not just a tiny accident, not just noise in the data. Real, measurable, genetic material passed down through thousands of generations. This meant one thing. At some point in history, Neanderthals and the ancestors of modern humans met, and they did not just meet. They had children together. For a long time, many scientists doubted this could even be possible. Two different human species mixing their DNA. It sounded almost like science fiction, but the evidence was undeniable. Today, most people with ancestry outside of Africa carry a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA inside their own bodies. It affects things you might never expect. Skin tone, hair texture, how some people's immune systems respond to disease, even certain sleep patterns. Scientists had to be extremely careful before announcing this. Ancient samples are easily contaminated. A single skin cell from a careless researcher could ruin an entire experiment and create a false result. So teams built special clean labs, almost like something out of a movie, just to handle these fragile ancient samples without ruining them. Only after years of painstaking, repeated testing did scientists feel confident enough to. That alone would have been a shocking discovery, a lost human species secretly living on inside us. But here is something that made the story even stranger. Not everyone carries the same Neanderthal DNA. Different modern populations carry slightly different fragments, inherited from different ancient meetings that happened in different places at different times. This meant the meetings between Neanderthals and early modern humans were, but that was not the biggest surprise. Because while scientists were still absorbing the Neanderthal discovery, something even stranger was waiting inside a cold, quiet cave in Siberia. In 2008, researchers exploring a place called Denisova Cave found something small, a single tiny bone fragment from a finger. It looked almost unremarkable, just a fragment easy to overlook. But when scientists extracted DNA from that fragment, nothing matched. It was not a modern human. It was not a known Neanderthal either. The genetic code was different enough to represent something new, an entirely unknown branch of ancient humans, later named the Denisovans. Think about that for a moment. An entire group of ancient humans, unknown to science, discovered because of one tiny finger bone. Scientists had almost no fossils to study, no detailed skeletons, barely any physical evidence at all, and yet DNA alone proved that Denisovans were real, and that they were genetically distinct from both modern humans and Neanderthals. Then, investigators uncovered something even more unexpected. Just like with Neanderthals, traces of Denisovan DNA showed up in living humans today. Certain populations in Asia and the Pacific Islands carry noticeably higher amounts of Denisovan ancestry. In some communities, it can reach several percent of their entire genetic code. This meant Denisovans did not just exist once, quietly, and disappear. They had met other early humans. They had children with them. And that connection survived, hidden in human DNA, for tens of thousands of years. What made the Denisovan discovery even more remarkable is how little physical evidence scientists actually had to work with. Compare that to Neanderthals, where scientists have studied hundreds of skeletons over more than a century. Denisovans, by comparison, remained almost a mystery made entirely of genetic code rather than physical bones. It took years before scientists finally found a partial Denisovan jawbone, discovered high in the mountains of Tibet, thousands of miles from the original cave in Siberia. That single discovery proved something important. Denisovans were not confined to one small region. They had spread across a huge stretch of ancient Asia, adapting to wildly different environments, from freezing caves to thin mountain air. But scientists were only getting started. As researchers studied more ancient genomes, they noticed something odd. Certain sections of DNA, especially in some Denisovan samples, did not seem to come from Neanderthals or modern humans at all. They came from something else, something even older and even more mysterious. Scientists began calling this a ghost population. Not a nickname for something spooky, but a scientific term. It means researchers can detect statistical evidence that an unknown group of ancient humans once existed and contributed DNA, even though no bones or fossils from that group have ever been found. In other words, there is a piece of the human story that we can prove existed through genetics alone, but for which we have no bodies, no bones, and no direct fossil evidence at all. That idea should stop you for a second. Somewhere in deep history, there were entire groups of humans who left no trace in the ground, no skeletons for museums, nothing physical to hold on to. And yet, their DNA survived. Passed down quietly, generation after generation, hidden inside people who had no idea it was even there. Some scientists believe these ghost populations may represent extremely ancient human relatives, possibly diverging from our shared family tree hundreds of thousands of years before Neanderthals and Denisovans even existed. But here is where honesty matters. This part of the story is still being studied. Researchers can detect the genetic signature of these ghost populations using advanced statistical modeling. But without physical fossils, many details remain uncertain. Scientists are confident something unknown existed. They are still working out exactly who or what that was. To understand how scientists can detect something they have never actually seen, imagine reading a very long, very old letter that has been copied over and over again for thousands of years. Along the way, a few strange sentences were mixed in from a completely different letter, written by someone else entirely. You may never find the original second letter. It might be lost forever. But if you study the patterns carefully enough, you can still tell that those strange sentences do not belong. You can prove something was added, even without ever holding the original source in your hands. That is essentially what scientists do with ghost population DNA. They compare huge amounts of genetic data, looking for patterns that simply do not fit the expected family tree. When those unusual patterns show up again and again, in consistent and predictable ways, it becomes strong evidence that an unknown ancestor once existed, even without a single bone to prove it. Even with that uncertainty, one thing became increasingly clear. The story of human ancestry was far messier and far more interesting than anyone had originally believed. This was not one clean lineage of Homo sapiens, marching proudly through history alone. It was multiple ancient human groups, overlapping in time, occasionally crossing paths, sometimes forming families together, and eventually leaving behind quiet genetic echoes inside the people who came after them. Then, one particular discovery in Africa reshaped the story yet again. For years, most ancient DNA research focused on cold, dry regions like Siberia and parts of Europe, because DNA survives much better in cold climates. Africa, with its heat and humidity, made it extremely difficult to preserve ancient genetic material. This created a problem. Africa is where modern humans originally evolved. If scientists could not properly study ancient African DNA, they were missing a massive piece of the puzzle. But newer studies, using clever genetic modeling on modern African populations, revealed something remarkable. Traces of a mysterious, ancient, ghost-like human lineage appear to exist within some populations in Africa as well. This ancient African lineage seems to have branched off from the rest of the human family tree an extremely long time ago, possibly before Neanderthals and Denisovans even split off. And just like the other lost groups, evidence suggests this population eventually mixed back in with the ancestors of modern humans. That means the story of lost human DNA is not limited to one continent, one cave, or one dramatic discovery. It appears to be a pattern, a recurring theme woven throughout early human history. Different groups of early humans separated for tens of thousands of years, evolving apart in isolation, then, unexpectedly, meeting again, mixing, blending, and quietly surviving inside descendants who would have no idea for tens of thousands of years what secrets they were carrying. At this point, you might be wondering something important. If this DNA is so ancient, so rare, and so hidden, how much of it is actually inside you right now? The answer depends on where your ancestors came from. But almost everyone carries some trace of these lost human relatives. People with European or Asian ancestry typically carry a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA. It is usually a small fraction of their total genome, but it is real, measurable, and consistent across studies. People from parts of Asia, and especially Pacific Island nations like Papua New Guinea, often carry Denisovan DNA as well, sometimes making up a noticeably higher percentage of their genetic code. Meanwhile, evidence for those deeper, mysterious ghost lineages appears scattered across various African populations, still being mapped and studied today. In other words, no matter where you come from, there is a real scientifically supported chance that a piece of your DNA traces back to a completely different, now extinct group of ancient humans. You're not just descended from one story, you are the result of several ancient human stories quietly combined. But why does any of this actually matter beyond simple curiosity? Because these ancient genetic fragments are not just harmless leftovers, some of them appear to have shaped human survival in powerful ways. Certain Denisovan gene variants, for example, appear linked to how some populations, living at extremely high altitudes, such as parts of the Tibetan Plateau, are able to survive with lower oxygen levels than most humans could normally handle. Certain Neanderthal gene variants have been linked to differences in immune system responses, potentially helping early modern humans adapt more quickly to new diseases and environments they encountered as they spread across the world. Some ancient variants are also linked to less helpful traits, including increased risk for certain health conditions in specific populations today. This tells us something powerful. These ancient human relatives were not simply replaced by modern humans. In some very real, measurable ways, they helped modern humans survive. Without those ancient meetings, some of that helpful genetic material might never have existed inside modern humans at all. The very idea we once had, that ancient extinct humans were simply inferior and disappeared, does not match the evidence. These weren't failures erased by history. In many cases, they were quiet contributors to human survival, hidden in plain sight inside our own bodies. There's another twist to this part of the story. When early modern humans first spread out of Africa into new lands, they faced diseases and environmental dangers their bodies had never encountered before. Neanderthals and Denisovans, on the other hand, had already been living in those regions for a very long time. Their bodies had slowly adapted over thousands of generations. When modern humans mixed with these older populations, they may have gained a shortcut. Instead of waiting thousands of years for their own immune systems to slowly evolve solutions through trial and error, they inherited some of those solutions almost instantly, passed down directly through ancient family lines. In a strange way, some scientists describe this as borrowing survival tools from humans who were better prepared for a particular environment. It was not a copy of an old idea. It was a genetic shortcut built by thousands of years of separate evolution, then unlocked through a single ancient relationship. Then scientists uncovered something that made the story even more emotional. Researchers eventually found direct physical proof that Neanderthals and Denisovans not only lived near each other, but had children together as well. In Denisova Cave, the very same cave where Denisovans were first discovered, scientists eventually found the remains of an ancient girl. When they studied her DNA closely, they discovered something extraordinary. Her mother was Neanderthal. Her father was Denisovan. She was not simply a person with mixed ancestry somewhere far back in her family tree. She was a first-generation child of two different ancient human groups. Think about what that really means. Two different types of ancient humans, different enough to be classified separately by scientists, met, connected, and had a daughter together. A real family made up of two ancient human worlds colliding into one small life. That single discovery turned an abstract genetic statistic into something deeply human. These were not just data points on a graph. They were people, families, real relationships between different branches of humanity that we once assumed could never have mixed at all. Researchers nicknamed her Denny, a simple name for a girl who lived somewhere around 90,000 years ago, without ever knowing that one day scientists on the other side of human history would study a tiny piece of her bone and be amazed by what they found. Before Denny was discovered, most scientists believed evidence of mixing between Neanderthals and Denisovans would be rare, if it existed at all. Finding a direct first-generation child of two different ancient human groups on the very first attempt felt almost impossible. Some researchers described it as an incredible stroke of luck, like finding a needle in an enormous haystack made of ancient bone fragments. Her discovery suggested something important. If scientists found direct proof of mixing this quickly, these kinds of relationships may not have been rare, isolated events. They may have happened far more often than anyone previously imagined. At this point, the story of lost human DNA had already reshaped our understanding of ancient humans, but it also raised an unsettling question. If these ancient human groups were capable of surviving, adapting, and even helping modern humans thrive, why did they eventually disappear? This is one of the biggest ongoing debates in modern anthropology. Some researchers believe modern humans may have outcompeted these older groups for resources, land, and food, slowly pushing smaller populations toward extinction over thousands of years. Others believe climate change played a major role, dramatically shifting environments in ways that older, smaller populations struggled to adapt to quickly enough. Some scientists suggest that repeated interbreeding with modern humans may have eventually absorbed these smaller populations into the much larger modern human gene pool, until their distinct identity effectively disappeared, even while pieces of their DNA lived on.